Hopefully that was loud enough. Trying to hold my beer up next to my headphones and pop this thing.
No,
But
it definitely was.
we're back. Part 2, part dose, with Mr. Schack from the East Coast. So we tried to do it a couple days ago, but schedules and all this didn't really work out. But finally, thanks to the miracle of technology and iPhones, which we were all just complaining about a minute ago, we're able to reconnect and get down and have some more fun just talking about random stuff. And there's been some things pop up recently in the past week and really day in the activity that we can hit on. So welcome back, Dan.
Thank you. Yeah, bailed last time. I couldn't muster a thought at that moment, so
it's leg day, man. Leg day, I'll get you.
It was the legs. It was just, I just get beat up during the day, and then it's like, I'm not going to be very interesting. And we sometimes I'll get caught in like this week I have 3 or 4 calls at night, so it's like, well, I better keep thinking of stuff to say.
Well, I'm sure we'll come up with plenty of stuff. But before we get into all that good stuff, welcome everyone to the Aged Out Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, as always, Mike Fantini, and with me is
Evan Worrell.
And as we said earlier, we're back with part 2 with Dan Schack. So before we dive in, make sure you hit the subscribe button on the YouTube channel, follow us on Spotify or Podbean. Follow us on Instagram, like the Facebook page. We all know the social media drill by now. So I'll let Evan and Dan just jump in and we'll go.
Yeah, man. Some of the things that we didn't really get to talk about last time, which always happens. Mike and I get on the end of the podcast with whoever, or we finish and we hit stop recording and they're like, oh man, we forgot to talk about this. We forgot to talk about that. Or we meant to say this. So never fails. But just some change-ups in the activity and stuff going on, one of which is the cymbal line thing, which, because other information has come out, that's kind of gone away, which is also very indicative of society in general, the newest, freshest debate or thing to be upset about.
It's a one-week news cycle, always.
Pretty much. Crossmen, cymbal line, decided they were not going to field one. Scouts did theirs very subtly. They basically just announced their percussion staff, and if you look on the staff list, there's obviously no cymbal techs, so I'm assuming they're not marching a cymbal line either. Mandarins, I think, bailed. But yeah, it was kind of crazy.
First of all, I mean, it seems like the floodgates just got opened up, right? And then it was like, this is it's a good time to break the news, I guess, on the more global level. Everyone sort of jumped on that trend, which I don't know if maybe it's ripping the Band-Aid off for DCI or something. I think I will say, whatever each caption head designer wants to do, they can do. And who is it for us or anyone to impose on these people that we are supposed to be understanding are the experts in our field? So I trust those expert opinions. What I will say is letting people register and pay money, understanding they're going to come out and try out, and then pulling the rug out. I think that's where I was like, okay, that's.
Did that happen?
Yeah, I think it did. I could not attest to specifically who. I would rather not, even if I probably could say. But I think there was okay, I'm going to register. I'm going to go out for cymbals. I was like, here's the money back in your bank account. We don't have a cymbal on it. The timing is crucial in this activity, and honestly, because the season is all year, so it's there's no lull, there's no downtime. If you lag at, you get caught with your pants down. I think that potentially happened for a couple of organizations, but I mean, the 24-hour news cycle, it's more 15 minutes or something. It's this, I mean, it's the same thing with the GoFundMe thing. It's if everything is news, if everything is outrage, then nothing is. It's do we really flatten everything into one kind of reactive sphere? It's all at a 10, So that happens, and then it minimizes the importance of other things that matter, and then it's hard to tell the difference.
That's Very accurate. I understood, and I definitely can sympathize with people being upset. A lot of it seemed to come from Crossmen cymbal alumni. Obviously, those people had a great experience in what they were able to do and how they were able to participate with the Crossmen as an organization, but they were launching like petitions to get it reinstated and stuff. And I get it that an organization has had a cymbal line for years and it's kind of a tradition, but with like the way staffs change and people are in and out that are different in that position as far as designing that and arranging for that, it's kind of crazy to think that you would want to force someone to do something that obviously they don't feel comfortable doing or want to do. So,
right. And well, we rely on tradition when it's convenient to us, and then we get rid of it when it's not, when it's inhibiting us. And it just seems like we get to pick and choose when certain things like tradition, for example, are important. Like we talked about last time a little bit, but every drum corps is trying to survive and upgrade themselves and figure out how to stay competitive and all of those things, which are already really hard. It's like, well, we undo lots and lots of tradition. The Crossmen moved from the Allentown area to San Antonio for their economic survival, and I don't think that tradition should get in the way, because tradition would ensure their demise, right? So in that instance, because of the economic incentive, it's like, oh yeah, no, go to San Antonio so the Corps can exist. Like that better than the opposite. It's like, so we get to cherry pick when we invoke arguments like tradition, because I don't see people pointing to tradition as the reason why we should keep doing things. Speaking of other things that are popping up in the news, like, well, this is traditional drum corps. It's like, well, it's problematic. Like, we're seeing where it's not working, right? So maybe I'm trying to stretch that too far, but is tradition really everything? Is that all we've got? Is that all this is about? I don't think so.
No, I agree completely. I mean, just like you said, you're cherry picking what you want to use as an argument just to suit your side of the argument, which is fine. And like you said, people take it like all the way to a 10. It's like, well, Crossman deciding they didn't want to feel the cymbal line is not DEFCON 5 or whatever the highest level of that is. But I saw people like, oh, cutting the Crossman cymbal line is the exact same as cutting the Vanguard snare line. I'm like,
no, it's not.
Is it? Is
no,
it
not
really?
At all.
I mean,
I saw that too,
I don't think so.
No.
Not to downplay what that section's value is, to say one is more valuable than the other, but I'm going to say that one is more valuable in achievement. Like you're talking about a group that has won like 3 French Severs in a row. Anyway.
The way I look at it is every drum corps has the right to choose their instrumentation within the rules of the activity. If they want to have 7 snare drums versus 9, they're allowed to do that. If they want to have a certain number of trumpets, or if they, for whatever reason, decide, yeah, we're not going to march trumpets this year, they have every right to do that. So it's just, they can do what they want. And if you don't like it, sorry. I mean, they have their reasons, and they don't really have to justify it, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, we are at a really interesting sort of space with the drum corps thing, because it's, some percentage a competitive athletic sport with spectators, and it's some percentage like music education with quotes around it, right? So, let's talk about like any other sport. Fans are just recklessly weighing in, talking about decisions as if it really affects their lives. People really hate Tom Brady, people really hate the Yankees, people really hate whatever. They have literally real feelings about those people or those organizations, yet because we're in a system that's all really designed around education on some level, it gets really weird. I mean, I think it's a good example I could think of is Ian Grom. I've been seeing pop up on Facebook, just tearing people down who are essentially criticizing kids, like high school kids on flow marching. And Ian is like, hey, like, just to keep in mind, this is all for the purpose of education. And I fully agree. And I actually like that of figuring the activity is putting out there eloquently as well. And then at the same time, it's like, if we not that if we allow that kind of vitriolic behavior, but rather it's participation, and in that way isn't participation just innately, like any press is good press, right? So I don't know, it's like we simultaneously want to shield our kids from the truths of the trolls and that vitriolic spew, yet the kids are on the internet, like they know what's out there probably better than we do, and two, like that's a part of being in a popular kind of paradigm, right? So we like want to grow the activity, but don't fully want to grow it. I don't know if that's true. That's my take on that a little bit.
I think it's funny you brought up the flow marching thing, because flow marching, I believe, is based in Austin, somewhere down there.
Texas. It's definitely in Texas.
It's their headquarters down there, and they did a bunch of podcasts or breakdowns or spent the days with Vandergriff down there, and they were posting all that stuff. And of course, Vandergriff is nasty good. And people are just ripping those kids apart for playing match grip. I'm like,
right.
These are like 14-year-old kids who, first of all, are playing really well at this activity that we all like to watch, especially for high school kids. But we like are upset with how it looks. Like, just close your eyes then if you don't want to. Like, listen. It sounds great. They sound fantastic.
Right. It's it's like I'm torn between ways. It's like, first of all, like the people that are complaining about the match grip thing, they just don't have ears. They're not thinking about the sound first. They're just like, snare drumming is supposed to be traditional grip. Speaking of tradition, like, what a perfect place to point, right? It's like, the fact that they're playing match grip is so that the program can grow and grow, and it definitely works. It's tried and true. We can point to multiple pieces of evidence, whether it be Dartmouth, whether it be Chino using flubs and making that accessible, like that has worked. So that's great. And I think that if you are getting upset about match grip, like you have nothing else to think about in your life but that. I mean, that's just insane, obviously. And then it's also like, well, like with the exposure that flow marching has been providing, like comes this type of criticism, and like to block that out is like you could think about where that's headed. Like I don't know that totally like deleting those kind of comments or trying to fully shield kids who maybe want to be in drum corps. Like, what happens when you're in the lot at finals and you're ticking, like people call that out. I mean, that's can be the reality of what we do. So not to say that the internet and finals lot are the same forum necessarily, but how far do we shield people from the reality of some of the activity that, I don't know, that these are things that we value in other kind of sports, right? Like if we're not allowed to weigh in our opinion about football, it's like it's kind of boring. That's part of what people do, right? So I don't know. It's like we want more and less all the time.
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest difference, obviously, you're talking about people want to weigh in. We have like ESPN, which is a whole channel dedicated to just analyzing and picking apart athletes and sports and stuff like that. I think the most annoying thing for me is typically the people that are so upset or like butthurt about it probably don't really know what they're talking about. So like I read these comments, and of course me with the knowledge that I have, I'm reading, I'm like, well, this person is clearly not educated on this activity, or else they wouldn't have even made this comment. So to say that we should remove those comments to shield kids, I don't think that's the appropriate answer either. I mean, that creates like a anti-immune disorder for like social interaction, in my opinion, kind of linking those, like you have to build up your tolerance somehow. So
yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think I think we let these people this kind of spew, and it's when you're on Facebook, it's your name. It's not like Twitter. It's like not anonymous. You can go in there, and it's like, let them get teared down. I mean, if that's what if they want to put their voice out there, then this forum and people who honestly have more insight can jump in there, and like we need to present ourselves in a certain way because this is about education and these are nonprofit organizations and we all care about our perception and all that good stuff. But it's like, I respect Ian Grom for jumping on there and honestly shredding those dudes. So that's, and I think that's a better alternative than just deleting it. I think that becomes a problem in itself, about what we really want. It's like, do we want more observation and do we want more interaction or do we want less? So it can get weird. It can get kind of dicey.
Bow show. Well, that was a pretty solid segue from Pathway there. It's from Cymbal Lines onto social etiquette on social media. But some other, we'll kind of hard cut here. Some other interesting news that happened within the last week or so was the announcement that came out of the Dynasty camp saying that they're going inactive. They're no longer going to be producing drums. And then the keyboards that they partner with, Bergerald, or I don't know, however you say that, I think it's probably German, said that they're going to stop production basically also. And so I was looking down the list. I was like, all right, who do I even know that used Dynasty? And like looking down, obviously the big name is Vanguard, which personal opinion, I would love to hear Paul Rennick's lines play on Pearl drums again, if that happens. And then SCVC, I guess. And then on the indoor side for World Class, it was like Atlanta Quest and Minnesota Brass. And I was like, man, there are not as many groups using this company as there used to be. So I was wondering if that was part of it or just they're having trouble filling orders or who knows.
I think might come from Mapex.
Go ahead, Mike.
Mapex cannibalizing their business. Because Mapex did a redesign, came in hard and fast, and gave groups a hell of a deal on their equipment to get as much of it as possible out there at all levels of the indoor and outdoor activity. So I don't think it's a result of Pearl or Yamaha doing anything different. I think the new kid on the block, Mapex, probably came in and just said, nope, ours are better. Here, and we'll give them to you for dirt cheap to prove it to you. And it's worked.
Yeah, that might be true. And there's no rules to this in terms of, like, every single group can have Pearl. Every single group can have Yamaha. Like, there's no limitation or restriction on what we use. I mean, we wouldn't think it was weird if Adidas sponsored all of the NFL. That's going to be just my metaphor for today for some reason, but that's not weird to us at all. Yet, we want to see all these groups use these different brands, whatever. And really, it's all about the tuning anyway, right? But the biggest thing is the top groups serve as kind of the, advertising. And yeah. I mean, it's kind of an odd situation. Vanguard has just did a 3-peat in drums, right? But I mean, that doesn't really mean that Dynasty is just going to sell. They're making this custom stuff. Paul has a custom snare drum. They have their tuning scheme just locked down pat that really works with their approach. And I'd be hard pressed to see another group sound like that on Dynasty drums. I don't think it's that easy. It's not that easy to sound like that on any drums, though. I agree. I would love to see a Pearl resurgent in that area, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's where they go with that. But it's like every group can use Vic Firth. Every group could use Innovative. This is all like taste, and this is all just support and what companies put themselves out there. But, Dynasty's sort of had a lot of ebb and flows and less groups using them. And, it's just like it's like if it's not out there, it's not out there, and it's sort of perpetual. Like, see Vanguard and everyone else is using Pearl Yamaha. That's maybe by just sheer volume, that's where this problem starts to rise. I don't know about Mapex and DCI, though. I don't know how many people use them.
A lot of the open class groups and lower tier world class groups, I think, are starting to use them and have more and more of them each summer. And there might be
I know,
some
like,
top 12
Matrix
groups
is using them in WGI because the Matrix switched from Dynasty a few years ago. I think the big thing is that, like Dan was saying, the groups for WGI and DCI are not making those companies money on their direct sales. No. They're really just using it for advertising and marketing to get the name out there. I mean, Dynasty's definitely not making money from Vanguard off the drums they're using. They're probably just like, here, use our drums. Advertise for us.
Right. In fact, I mean, groups like that, usually it's like the drums are free, then the organizations resell them and they keep that, however minimal that might be, they sell it. So the top groups are probably getting floated these drums, right? So they're actually might be losing money in some way, like actually. And then if there's like some turnaround via the that comes through, sure, but it's not concrete in that way. There's a lot of risk, and you know, like Pearl and Yamaha's marching sector is minute in the scheme of the company itself.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, they're making jet skis, they're making pianos, they're making everything.
Yamaha makes tons of stuff,
right? And this is just a drop in the bucket, right? And then Pearl has just, you know, all their mallet stuff. I mean, don't they make horns, right? Adams, in Holland. So they're doing work, a lot of work outside the marching sector, right? Whereas Dynasty, they don't make drum sets. No, if they make concert equipment, I doubt it, right? So, I mean, there you have it, right? It's like marching only, right? So, you know.
True.
What does that say? I wonder what that means. I don't exactly know, honestly.
Do you think, and there's probably no way to know this, obviously, right now, but it wouldn't surprise me if they come back out with drums in a few years with a redesign, kind of what Mapex did, and try to come out swinging again and kind of say, all right, well, we're the low man on the totem pole. Let's take a step back, reevaluate, redesign, re-engineer this stuff to be more competitive, and then try again.
Me personally, I don't think that their drums were not competitive because, like Dan said, a lot of that comes down to tuning. And they did redesign their snare drums years ago. I mean, obviously, you can make them sound good. There are groups out there that clearly make them sound good, and I would argue sound better than Mapex, personally, in my personal preference. I've yet to hear a Mapex outdoor line sound good ever, or at least have any sort of projection to their drum line.
I mean, even the Blue Devils tuning stuff, I think they're still struggling through this turnover with System Blue, whereas like the Dynasty tuning sounds great. I mean, Vanguard sounds good, they win. So it's necessarily just a quality problem. I think it's like so many factors, you know. It's just like this cycle of only a couple groups use it, then they only turn over so many, like in the fall to high schools and indoor groups, and then it's like just this ongoing thing. So I don't know. I don't really know too much about like the business side of stuff, honestly. Like, probably
there could be like internal business things with like a distributor or a supplier. I mean, who knows?
I don't know. I'm going to take this opportunity to address a side note that we've said a couple times. Can we talk about how crazy it is that Vanguard's won drums the last 3 years straight?
Like, I mean, it definitely
nuts.
Doesn't seem to be happening as much because there's so many more high-level groups out there. Back when, I'm trying to think of the last group that won 3 in a row. Maybe
Cadets ever do it?
Cadets 01, 02, 03.
The Cadets 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been done, and then if you look like actually you can like trace a line right back to where we just were. 1, 2, 3 Cadets, 04 Vanguard, 05 Cadets. From there, we go like 2006 was who?
Phantom.
2007
Mm-hmm.
Blue Devils. 2008, Phantom. 2009, Blue Devils. 2010, Phantom. 2011, Dallas Cavaliers. 2012, Blue Devils. 2013,
Cadets.
Cadets, so they got one in there. Then 14, Blue Devils, I think.
Vanguard or Blue Devils, it was one of those two.
Anyway, you see a pattern, right? So I'm actually like not super like surprised or taken aback. And, you know, I think that there are things Vanguard, Paul Rennick in general, does and is able to do that explains it very logically in my mind. You know, like other than the fact that they have like a great system there, the shows and the music, it's designed very percussion friendly. Like Paul's the musical coordinator at Vanguard. So the work is being done front end to tee them up and make them a very readable component of their shows. It's not deniable, you know. It's like you can read the Vanguard percussion program top to bottom.
They play well, and on top of that, they're staged well and they're designed well. It's like you watch the Vanguard show from last year, and it's like if you're a percussion judge out in the field, it's very accessible to judge and get out in front of them from a drill standpoint, as far as not having to navigate yourself through the brass or the color guard.
Yeah, that's right. And that's a shift in the activity that we are experiencing where, you know, kick-ass drill is awesome and it's a part of what we do. And I hope it doesn't get lost in my times are just changing. What drill looks like and what staging looks like is vastly different. You know, like you can see in the sort of striations of the competitive thing where groups sit based on how drilly their drill is. You know, like some people are still doing drill and some people are staging and some people are, you know, it's just different. So I think the drum thing is both driving and reacting to that. Like I think WGI percussion has driven DCI where it is, but then at the same time, like the DCI percussion and the sheets have not like residually really caught up yet. So it's sort of a push and pull with that. But I think Vanguard is just designed in such a clarity of intent is undeniable, and therefore they can be rewarded. They even have the potential to be rewarded in the first place, which I think is super key.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. You're talking about drill or people who are still doing like drill, just like marching. Cadets last year comes to mind. I think about the years that I marched Crown, and I think, obviously, in my biased opinion, we had every opportunity to win a drum trophy, but oftentimes we were just like flat out running so much and weaving in and out of the brass that people just didn't get to certain sections of the show ever. Like there's sections I can remember that we played really well that no judge ever got to just because they couldn't.
Right. Like if a tree falls in the woods and no one's around to hear it, doesn't make sound. You know, like
exactly.
You can play all the clean stuff that you want, but if it's literally not read, and I'm talking on a first read, then it's not useful to you, you know? And then you think about how much time you spent cleaning that versus these groups who tee up these moments and they're just working on their features because that's what's read every time. So then it turns into the hours you spend cleaning because you are cleaning things that are read maybe 5% of the time, right? So that really comes into play for some of the top groups is like they literally spent more time playing these moments that are exposed that they would get read, and they're rewarded for it versus like, well, I hope someone gets out there tonight, or I hope someone gets out there tomorrow night. Or it's like, oh, they just need another read. It's like, no. Like DCI will put someone in front of you at a regional or at quarterfinals or any of those nights who has never read you before. Like that will happen. So it's about the very first read, which is, I don't think that's present in everyone's minds all the time when we have these kind of discussions. It's like, if I were a drum judge watching these groups, which are all really, really good, then these differences matter. That becomes the differentiating factor, I would say. Just readability from a geographical standpoint, maybe.
Yeah. It's definitely
Makes sense.
Huge portion of it. Evan, where do you want to go next?
Well, speaking of like design, and we're start kind of talking about the design elements, we can kind of shift gears a little bit if you guys want to.
Yeah.
There's been some staff shakeups lately. People making announcements. Obviously, Blue Stars have a new staff. Scouts have a new staff. Phantom have a new staff, which kind of did a old dipsy-do flip-flop. Crossmen have some staff changes. Who else in the top? I'm trying to think.
That might be it.
Well, Cavaliers had a change.
Oh yeah, Joe Hobbs is no longer at the Cavaliers; is now at the Blue Coats, which is
that's right.
Interesting.
Huh? Really?
Yeah, wouldn't have thought that one was happening, but okay.
So let me ask you guys: like, do you think this is unusual? This year?
Many staff changes?
Yeah,
it feels like there's a lot, and also it's kind of weird because some have like gone directly like opposite or like traded places, and I don't know. I think there's more questions in my mind of why a staff change was made other than to just try to do something new. Like the Blue Stars one kind of tripped me a little bit. I didn't see Eric Shriver leaving or being asked to leave or whatever the scenario was there.
Right.
Yeah, it seems like a lot.
Yeah. I think, well, obviously, like, the circumstances under which these turnovers happen are always different, but it's usually like one thing or the other, which is like the people up top weren't happy with the output or the people on the ground weren't happy with their experience, and then the change happens, right? Mm-hmm. But I think one thing that you've noted, which is important and is very odd to me, but also like just a pattern of the activity, is like the incestuous nature of what we do. It's like there's really no one else out there to teach. Like, we're just going to dip into the same pool of people. And same with the arrangers, you know, like one arranger having multiple DCI groups or something like that, like gets pretty funky. Those are two different kind of topics, but
no,
I don't know. I don't know what the deal is with, like, we just kind of keep dipping into the same resource expecting things to change, I guess.
Well, Dan, there's just a finite number of people that can make a living doing this. And I know Evan and I have talked about the fact that there's a lot of awesome educational talent that could really help grow this activity that doesn't do it because the money's not there. So you only have a small number of people that a lot of them happen to be school teachers, so they have their summers free. So you're going to have a small finite pool of teachers you can pull from. There's only so many caption heads out there. There's only so many people that have the ability to be a snare tech or a battery coordinator or, I mean, a horn line instructor or visual tech. Like, it's just a small pool. And until somehow, if ever, more money comes to the activity, that's just going to be how it is.
Yeah.
Well, I think that I agree that there is a small number of people or that the pool is small, but I don't think it's as small as the activity makes it. Like Dan's saying, like, you have this recycled names on the list. I think one of the sweetest things that happened, and it kind of came out of nowhere for probably people who don't follow the activity or people that know Travis. And obviously I'm very biased to Travis. He's an awesome friend, Travis Speedrum, but they gave him a shot to do this. And a lot of people who saw that probably didn't know, like, his name or like his background, or like, oh, who's this dude? It's like, this is caption head, blah, blah, blah. But that doesn't mean that people can't do a good job. Obviously, like, he has, like, the percussion program since he's been there has been better each year. So I think there are people out there that, given the shot and the opportunity, can prove themselves and make an organization better year to year.
Right. People are afraid to take that chance, I think, because if you're a young person like Travis was, he had a good amount of experience, but some might say not enough experience to be typically made a caption head of the percussion section of a top 6 drum corps every summer. So I think until corps become a little more willing to take a risk on a young person to get them in there at a young age and say, okay, you can make a little bit of money to be able to continue doing this and make kind of a career out of it, I don't know.
Right. Well, I agree with much of what was just said, and I think it's funny that in terms of what our mission statements are outward facing is that we're looking to educate kids, yet are we looking to educate teachers too? You know, like that's what that seems to be saying to me is we want to teach the kids and get them to learn and blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, but you need to come in fully loaded to like do this job that really no one knows how to do because there's no right way to do it. So it's like, well, we should be looking to like train up upper management in the staff if we, you know, if it's lacking, let's say. And then that being said, like I think someone like Ben Piles comes to mind over at Colts and at Monarch, who was given a chance. You know, I think he taught at Spirit. I think he came through Mike McIntosh, Blue Coats Drumlines, and like he came and really like freshened up the Colts thing. He's been a big driving force there. He teaches there. He's not just arranging, which no one can really do anyway these days. And then the Monarch thing. So he's working full time, like similar to what Travis is doing, like to hone his craft. And it takes that, like it literally takes doing it at the highest level all the time, like just putting yourself out there and just seeing what works. So I think there's also like that willingness to engage, like Mike, you were saying, like the amount of people that can actually logistically go on the road. Like I agree with that too. It's like, man, it's like really hard to even get in that position, you know, like what are your life choices rather that allow that or don't, you know? So it's like a lot of maneuvering to do that work. It's not easy to just like, you can't just drop you have to really engineer your life around that.
Yep. Like I would love to teach, and I have other friends that marched in high-level groups that would love to teach, but their career paths just don't allow it.
Right. Well, you have to be available. I think that's a big thing, is that there's a lot of people that do want to get out there, but it's like, oh, I want to do a couple of weeks. Like it's not as common anymore, I would say. Like I think, well, maybe that's just like what we try to do at Crown, but it's like if you just need to be there more. I think that's it's really, really hard to come in and know what exactly the flow, the vibe, the patterns, the personalities are just doing a subbing gig. Like it's really, really hard at that level. So I think, I don't know, like for us, we look for people who can really do really most of the time, like maybe split it with one other person. But for a caption head, like Travis didn't leave the road at all last year. You know, I think the last 2 summers I did 80 out of 90 days. Sean Mack probably did like 95 out of 90 days. Somehow he added days to tour. But that's, you know,
that dude's crazy.
He is. But then we just like know what's going on, and you can have a hold on what's going on. So, because honestly, it's tough coming in and out. Like things change so quick. Like you already know. Like it's just constant.
I would never want to do the sub-in gig. Like if somebody called me and said, "Hey, can you take like a week or 2 off of work and just come in and teach this corps in the middle of the tour," I don't think I would want to do it, because it would take me half the time I was there just to get up to speed with how they do things and just the procedure they follow day to day, and kind of fitting in with the rest of the way the staff teaches. And I don't think I'd want to do it.
That's kind of interesting.
It could be good. It could be bad. Like I think the good thing are your ears would be fresh.
Yeah, the fresh perspective.
You will literally hear things that people are not hearing. But I think what you're saying is true. Like, just to make sure that you've ingrained yourself in the process as it's been set up is going to take you a bit. Yep. If you're thinking hard enough, if you come in and bulldoze everything, maybe you'll be in there day one, but you're not going to be well liked, right? So there is such a process at that point that you got to be smart about how you get in. So I mean, we don't really do that. Like we have the people who are at the camps who are helping to pick the drum line, also at spring training and on tour, and there's just lots of overlap. So we avoid that problem. Sorry, Evan, you were going to jump in. I interrupted you before.
Oh, no, it's fine. I just think that's interesting, too, because obviously you guys have that methodology or practice that you have set up with your group and organization at Crown, where there's a lot of people that are there a lot of time. And then when I look at some of these other staff lists, there's groups that have like 4 snare techs, maybe sometimes 5. And I'm just like looking at them like, man, how are these people going to operate together when they're either there at the same time or not there at the same time? And a lot of them have like different playing styles and backgrounds too. And I'm just like, it's going to be interesting to see how it turns out.
Too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah, especially, I mean, for a single section, there's got to be some identity coming at it with the teaching. Like, you have 4 people, like, how are you going to find that middle grounds where everyone's really getting what they want to the point that they're expressing themselves and what they expect and all that. So, and that's hard. Like, in 17, me and Sean Mack were both like battery manager at Crown, and we had to figure out what I kept and what I put aside and what he kept and what he put aside, and we worked together to make sure that we were both fulfilled in what we expected. And that's like 2 of us, and we also designed together, so we were collaborating. But like, yeah, basically what happens is people go on the road, they're like, hey, keep your left hand down, and then they leave, and then someone comes in and says like, hey, you know, your left hand should be higher, and it's like, okay, I don't know what to do, and it's dirty. Like, it's probably pretty common. So like, yeah, the identity, like, not like, I don't know, the identity of who you choose to teach, I think does kind of matter, like both like personality wise and like the style, right? I don't know. But I think it's tough, like, because basically what this comes down to, like we said, is like, if you can't logistically get 2 people to split the 90-day tour, then what do? That's what you do. You get a bunch of people who can take 2 weeks off their job and then come in.
Yep.
True.
It's just the nature of the beast, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think I know now it is, but back in the day, like, old school people would be like, you know, there was a battery coordinator, who was the snare tech, and there was the tonal tech, and he was the caption head, and that was it. And they both also taught the pit, the end. And it's like, whoa, okay, so 2 people on tour, that was it. It's like, you probably didn't lose your mind, right? So I think a part of it too is, like, honestly, like, I think drum corps has become more intricate, and people need breaks. Like, if you stay on the road the whole summer and you teach every block, you'll get burnt out. You know what I mean?
Go crazy.
Like, yeah. Because it's too intricate. There's too many details, and you need support, and you need breaks, and you know, like,
and there's pressure to produce.
I mean, constantly, and like, not to mention you're always on. Like, if you're not at a judges meeting, then you're like talking about the next day. You're writing the schedules, and like, I just think drum corps is more intricate than what it was in the 80s and the 90s. Like, I'll just say it outright.
Well, the shows are more complicated. The drill's harder. The music's harder. Like, it's more intertwined. I don't know.
Yeah, everything. No, every aspect of it. You could not name one that I would say it was more intricate or detail oriented in 1980, right? So that's part of the task, and I think that is a reason why we see more like a subbing in and out, so people can maintain their freshness, because that's the hardest thing to do when you do the full tour, is just stay fresh. So it's part of that, and you know, and then like, it's the changing nature of the job market at large and how much money people need. Like, we're in a really kind of depressed time economically, especially for people that are like millennials who took on all this college debt, blah blah blah. Like, there's a lot of like big picture moving parts that I think ultimately affect the staff list you see when there's 4 snare techs. Like, what are the, you know, economic ramifications of that? I think there are many kind of, you know, variables that connect to that thing that we're saying is ultimately bad, I guess. Or could be.
Speaking of keeping it fresh, do you have another thought on that, Mike?
No, I was going to move on, so go ahead.
Okay. Speaking of like keeping staff fresh and keeping them from losing their minds and staying sane, DCI and Dan Atchison made a press release / video statement today, basically in regards of staff members not staying sane and not keeping their minds right. I guess in the press release, Dan Atchison said that DCI, Drum Corps International, was notified by a news agency that there were going to be more allegations coming out against staff members in having inappropriate misconduct with members and students, and obviously people who are participating and not other staff members, that stuff was going to be coming out recently. They didn't tell them what or who or where or why or how or anything like that, but basically like, hey, this is coming to your front door. And so he made a statement saying that DCI was taking steps and doing this to make a change in the culture and to help make sure that the kids are thought first, which people obviously have disagreements with already, and if they're taking effective statements. But yeah, man, it is about to be an interesting summer. I feel like next year, even more so than it already was this past year with the whole Cadets Hopkins thing. Yeah, it's going to get wild.
Sure. I mean, it's funny, like, well, it's not funny, but, you know, it's interesting that he put the statement out, like, pretty much with his hands in the air, like, we do background checks and we do this. It's like, well, you did that as a reaction to a really big mess up, like a big old poo-poo mess up, which was George Hopkins as a person in total, right? Like, not only, I mean, this dude from Pio, the Roman Polanski, I think, or is that an actor?
I don't know that.
I don't know.
Whatever, you know, this Pio guy, like that's like we haven't even seen what's happened with George in terms of those things, like how he operated the drum corps. It's only been about the sexual allegations, right? So it's like we're so reactive, like, oh no, we do background. How dare this news source like kind of, you know, smite us or whatever. It's like, well, it hasn't been the case up to this point. And then and I think just this person who I think the Philly Inquirer chick who stumbled upon this story, I mean, she is riding high, you know, like she is probably having the upswing of her career, uncovering this kind of what she is making seem like this really, well, potentially is very insidious sort of kind of prop in drum corps. But I think in drum corps, without a context, it seems really bad because it's about teachers and students, and there's like this power dynamic. But it also gets really blurry because a lot of the teachers were like 23, or they were in the corps and it's a senior corps or whatever. Like, there's a lot of like blurry lines that just aren't as distinct as other places in society. But I think in general, it's like this explosion is bigger than drum corps. Drum corps is a mere node amongst much, much larger ones in which men are being outed for basically being creepy, like, and basically being, you know, monsters or whatever. You could kind of find the spectrum between creepy and monster as you see fit. But it's like we are merely one thing amongst many, you know. So I think it becomes a problem because it's like a teaching environment. Again, going back to that, like, we are educators and they're students. But hey, like, this has been happening in high schools and middle schools for God knows how long. We're not shutting the middle schools down. We're not shutting the high schools down, right? So that's not the answer. Like, I don't think shutting drum corps down is necessarily – it's sort of the equivalent to, you know, deleting that troll on the internet on Flow Marching. It's like, oh, now the problem's gone. We deleted it. Like, no, like, we should probably deal with it and understand its resonances and its implications and do serious work thinking about how to go about bettering this culture. But, dude, like, middle school teachers have assaulted students and high school teachers, and they've had relationships, and there's been this and that and this and that, you know, you name it. So I think we're just involved. And
they actually do background checks.
Yeah, legit ones.
Right, they do. So, I mean, that, you know, does that even mean, like, it's guaranteed? No, it definitely doesn't. I just think that, like, drum corps is, like, experiencing a shockwave or whatever, but really it's, like, this is just the changing of times. Like, we are calling a spade, and we're saying that people have acted in ways that have made other people feel inappropriate, and we are addressing that. And it's not restricted to drum corps, but I think because drum corps specifically is filled with people that are very reactionary and very passionate and very opinion oriented, like, it just gets inflated. I mean, this is like what we were talking about before with the cymbal thing. It's like it gets so hyperbolized that it's like just essential. It's like, I know this and this is what this is and there's nothing else. And if you even suggest that there's another alternative, you are just as bad as the perpetrator of this thing that might or might not have happened. We just skip right to that. And that's like the internet culture. It's all that stuff. So I don't know what makes drum corps different. Like, I wonder about that. Like, I marched senior corps when I was 14 and there were 50-something-year-old people in it, and like, you know, that was by design. That was how those cores operate. So is that programmed into the culture, or should we just be like, well, everyone should just keep their hands to themselves, their eyes down? How is it possible these things happen? I don't know. Like, I'm not necessarily trying to explain why the things happen that happen, but I think that there's a lot of nuance that gets lost in sort of like even that stupid post, like, you know, it's sort of just like, oh, we do background checks now, so everything's better. Like, well, we'll see about that.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, not that this is a reason or me saying that it is what it is, or it's always going to be this, but background checks and all that stuff should be implemented. That stuff's great, but at the end of the day, some people just suck. Some people are just creepy, gross, terrible people, and they're going to take advantage of a situation. And then there's also, like you said, instances where it's very, very blurry, where kids are teaching kids who now is on a staff position, but 2 years ago they were also marching with the people they're teaching. Not all those cases that I'm sure are brought up are that sort of situation, but it is definitely a different dynamic than public education, where you're in a classroom with a teacher who has a degree to teach and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think, to me, the line is not super blurry, but I am also 28 years old now. You know, when I was teaching and I was 22, 23, I get it, but also, like, I don't know, there's a pretty overt kind of authoritative turn that happens when you are on staff and you're hanging out with the staff and you talk about the show and you talk about the students and you talk about how you're going to do this thing. I think it is very clear that if you are like cathartic and you are expressing like your teaching woes to a student that's in your group, you are just a terrible teacher. Like, that's not even like rape, assault, whatever. It's like, if you choose to be in a relationship with the person who is in the group that you are teaching, like, your evaluative lens is intrinsically skewed. Like, you are assessing the group through a relationship you have with someone in it. That seems like problematic to me on a level that's not necessarily even illegal or immoral. It's just like, you are not paying attention to the show. You're not paying attention to the group. You're paying attention to this relationship. The show may happen through the perspective of that person. That's really weird to me, because like, there are certain things I want to disclose and talk to my students about, and there are things I do not, for their and my own benefit. And when that gets erased, like, as an educator, if you can't tell that, well, you're not paying attention. So I think there's just like that, like, you're being a bad teacher, you know, because you are confiding in someone who is trusting you to some level, and you are obliterating that trust just by letting them into certain parts of information that they should have no part in. And I think that is not discussed whatsoever. I don't think we ever think about that, is that you are being an immature teacher when those kind of things happen, whether it's sexual in nature or not.
True. Very true.
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
I have one thing I kind of want to, unless Evan, you have something else on this topic.
No, man.
All right. I kind of want to take a left turn. This is something I really wanted to make sure we get to. This is more on the back to the drumming side of things, less on the administrative or running of organizations.
By all means.
Yeah, let's get back to what really matters here. Not that that other stuff's not important, but Crown plays with one of the best sound qualities across the board, I think, from a maturity standpoint and a warmth and beefiness standpoint of anyone in the activity, in my opinion. Is the sound quality your all's primary focus all season, and then a lot of the clarity you get kind of come as a result of everyone approaching the drum the same way, knowing the heights, knowing all the definitions? And I guess, do you guys get to where you get to at the end of the season by focusing primarily on fundamentals and sound quality and all doing that the same way? Or do you do that early on and then later in the season it's a lot of, hey, this chunk sucks, we have to detail this a lot? Or is that a smaller portion of what you do?
Sure. I don't know if I can answer this super perfectly, but
I know that was a long question, but
I think we try to find that median. I think we try to be a group that draws from what the other groups do really well, and we want to do all of that. You know, like, I think that the Vanguard's dynamic system really works and makes them on a caliber of that range that most people don't get to. So I want to figure out how they do that, and I want to implement that. That's something that they do great. So for me, part of that change was not using heights at all. I would not use numbers as heights. I would use dynamics. So I wanted to speak in a more dynamic language so that we were thinking about the music as music and not as numbers and not as math. Because when you're live, you don't really know what the height is. It doesn't really matter. And in fact, judges don't evaluate heights or really uniformity of technique whatsoever. That being said, something that we do care about is the uniformity of approach, and not so much the look of the hands, because I think we've accepted more that people's hands look slightly different, but that the mechanics and that the reaction and that the what is happening in your hands is pretty similar person to person. You know, like, we really, I think early, and when we learn the music, like, we are very detailed. Like, I think we try to be as detailed as possible up front, so that we have the definitions. Like, no doubt, like, we do have it defined. It's not a free-for-all. And we also have, like, an entire, like, visual aesthetic component that is really important to us. This is specifically how we flow in our upstroke versus our downstroke. It's a little bit different than what some people do. I teach, like, basically a controlled upstroke where your downstroke is as fast as possible and the upstroke is as slow as possible within the rhythmic structure, so that you're essentially winding up and pitching the stick into the drum head as fast as you can, especially at a higher range. Once you get lower into the pianissimo and piano ranges, there's slightly less velocity involved, so you're not getting that rubber pencil look. But really, I guess what I could say is that what we are trying to do, and we are continually trying to do, at least since I've been here, is to converge the best of every world that is out there, which in many ways means obliterating some of our fundamental philosophies to adopt other ones. Like, I always was taught heights. I was taught X certain ways, and by X I mean variable, not rhythm X, but X, Y, Z certain ways. But we have picked up in, you know, different kind of schools of thought just by the people that we work with year round. So I would say we focus on the aesthetic as a huge priority, but the aesthetic is derivative of an approach that yields sound quality. So you look good because you are flowing through the drum well, which is making you sound good. And so it's always oriented towards sound production, and it's always about playing in a homogeneous sound and having flexible ears that are shifting in the environment and being the ultimate musician and drummer. But I think what it comes down to is creating a great sound. And I think that is clearly reflected in the way that we are evaluated on the field. Is half the time the judges can't really look at you like that. You probably the nuances group to group are almost unnoticeable in a first read. So the sound, though, is not. I think the sound is readable because you can hear it regardless of if you look. And in fact, you can hear it somewhat better if you don't look, right? So I think we're trying to capture sort of all of those different methods and all of those different priorities, because why not? But I do think that the visual aspect is something that important, and it drew me to the activity. I really think that the hands looking and flowing good is important, but I think that framing it as a means through which you get good sound is the difference. And I think that's the mistake people make, is like, well, your hands have to look good. Well, why? Because it looks good. Well, I don't really care. Rather, like, your hands have to look good. Why? Because if your hands flow in time, you will then play in time. So that might be the short, probably the really short abridged version, but we are trying not to get locked into a single system, because why is anybody, I guess, is what I ask. So that's been Tom, that's been Travis and I and Sean Mack and the techs. It's been working with the people that we work with. Like, we work with Matt Penland at George Mason, and we have learned a tremendous amount working with him. He's the quad guy at Vanguard, and he works, I think he's in the Navy band. Hopefully I'm not misspeaking. I'm pretty sure he's in the Navy band. But just hearing him talk about his approach, I mean, like, we picked up so much of that, and it was essentially because we were just willing to listen and saw the value in that, and didn't look at it as like, well, Vanguard does that, and Crown does that, and Devs do that, and Cadets do that. Like, that is some really useless thinking. And I think many people are stuck in their individual identity and their individual approach, but for no really good reason. You know, unless you are literally three-peating, like we were talking about, you can improve and change. So I think we're always looking to evolve and incorporate the things that we like out there, you know. So I think that's why we have that sound, but we're also trying to play the licks, but we're also trying to do the body. Like, we don't want to leave any stone unturned. So we're going for that fresh kind of hybrid thing that isn't out there. At least in my mind, I want to figure out what's missing and then fill in those cracks. That's been important, I think, in the last couple of years for Crown, at least.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, because I think the biggest thing you were saying there that resonates with me is talking about why do the hands look good? Do they look good just to look good? Like me playing snare drum next to, say, either of you guys, if we all look the exact same, the chances that we're producing the exact same sound is probably less likely, because our hands are built different, our arms are built different, like our entire bodies are built different. So if we're moving the exact same, then the likelihood that we're creating the exact same sound is probably lower, because what it's going to take for me to play with the exact same sound as Dan or Mike is probably going to move or look slightly different, just because our mechanics are different.
Yeah. That's right. And the sound is after the equal sign. Like, what you do in your equation doesn't matter. It's what do you sound like after? What do you sound like as the output of your approach? So not making that the priority seems very backwards to me. Even though I think the look is important, it's like we are playing music. So lest we forget that we're playing music. And I think the point about physiology is really important. It's like, why are we going to try to fit circles into squares? Like, hey, your hands are going to look slightly different. I think Rhythm X was really good about this. It was like, not really about, you know, you turn your hand like this, your left hand, blah, blah, blah. It wasn't that. It was like, no, like soft hands, like universal grip, basic tenets. But it was like, whoa, yeah, like we can all interpret that our own way and it works. Back of the hand, you know, whatever. So I think people get too detailed with some really small finite technical things, and it really basically does nothing. So sorry if that offends somebody, but I think that's true.
No, I agree with you, definitely. With the kids that I teach at the high school level, I never really harp on, oh, well, your hand moves slightly differently than his. I just talk about the way they hit the drum. And with young kids especially, I feel like that'll get you over halfway to where you want to be from a clarity standpoint. If you get them hitting the drum the same way and feeling time together and interpreting the rhythms correctly together, you're almost all the way there.
Well, and with young kids too, I think that my approach is to ask them questions as much as just give them answers. Like, all right, what'd you feel? Fast, slow, loud, soft. What did you hear in the rhythm? Like asking them questions to self-assess themselves. So, I mean, obviously they can't see their hands when they are playing. At least especially the vantage point that they see it from is completely different than what I see as an educator. So I'm like, all right, what do you hear? Are your hands balanced? Right hand louder, left hand louder, this, that. So I think it's really just about using your ears at the end of the day, like Dan said. And the judges are doing that too, like especially in drum corps. They're running around with those headsets that half the time they're not even looking at the drum line. They're just trying to navigate their way through the corps, through the drill. So they're just listening without looking. So
right. And the thing with all these drum lines is we all do the aesthetic component pretty differently. So if you are a high school kid who, you know, has gone through the ranks of a couple drum lines and you've learned how to play like super great, like your sound is awesome, your rhythmic accuracy is awesome, your awareness of your own self is awesome, and you show up and you like have a little slice in your right hand, do you think that you're going to get cut? Like, no. Like those are the things that are addressed really at that last 5% level. So it's like, yeah, I mean, if you focus on getting the slice out of kids' hands and then the sounds that are coming out of their drums are alien to music, what is the point? I don't understand. Like, cool, they're not slicing, but it sounds like paper being torn, right? Versus like, hey, like, oh, that dude kind of has a slice, but this dude's like bottom finger, so they're coming in and out, but like it is clear. Like that just seems sort of obvious to me at this point, but I know that I came up in a area where it was like beads in the center, 90 degrees, blah blah blah, like all these rules. It was like, do I sound good? And honestly, like that was one of my faults, I think, was I wasn't focused on the sound I was producing as a player. I was more focused on like the look and those kind of things. And I don't know, I think it's all about finding a balance. You know, I think for Crown, to like circle back, it's like we are really trying to be like every man's drum line, and by every man I mean like the, you know, every man, whomever. Like, I want people who think they don't like Crown to like Crown, and I want the people who mark Crown and who like the old school Crown to like Crown. Like, I want to find that area to live in, because then we can be just, people will be fans of us, you know, like, and I think that's cool, and that's different. I think the tenets that Crown used to operate on were slightly different, and we have definitely changed a bit. You know, I think we might have talked about last time, like doing all the body, like that's just, it's different, you know, it's different. We are trying to upheave drum corps in general. How about that?
Oh yeah, I like it. I'm definitely a fan. I never even marched Crown, and I like what you guys are doing a lot.
Well, I like what you're doing because it's good. I mean, obviously, I'm not an old school Crown, but I'm definitely a previous version of Crown than what it currently is. But good is good at the end of the day. So
right. I mean, like that's the thing. Like, can we, like, how close can we get to being objectively? You know, that's the mark. Is like, if everyone likes the Blue Devils, they're doing something right. So I'd rather be that than be like, oh, like they're so niche, no one gets it. Like, that's not good.
Yeah. Not what you want. Well, we got anything else we want to hit on, or you want to wrap it up? We're going for about an hour and 8 minutes.
Yeah, I am good. I'm spent. I feel like we could probably keep going, but we'll just do this again at some time.
Yeah,
I think there's definitely more topics out there, but I don't want to exasperate all of our.
Dan's definitely an interesting enough guest that as things happen throughout the rest of the year and next year, we'll have him on again for sure. It was too much fun. We need an excuse to hang out with him. We don't get to see Dan very often because he's on the East Coast and we're in the Midwest.
I know, it'll probably be April when we all meet up.
Yeah. Yep.
True. Are you? Well, do you guys make it this way for any WGI shows? Like,
no, we're not. We're doing Richmond and New Jersey this year. We're not doing Dayton. So unfortunately, Mason won't be out there. It hasn't been super useful for us. Like, we haven't been ready. So we really want to gear up for.
It's a long haul too.
Thing.
Yeah, it's
a haul, and like, we just need to get read, but we more so just need to rehearse and make sure that we are sparkling. So we just decided to stay local this year, so we'll be out for finals.
I feel you.
Cool. Yep. Cool. Well, you guys are taking over the East Coast. Got a what's the word I'm looking for? You're creating a monster between your George Mason and Crown connection and marriage you've kind of set up. Pretty cool.
I appreciate that. It's all about consistency, though. Yep. So we got to, you know, like last year, GMU got in the finals 2 years in a row. Now we got to make it 3. And then for Travis and I, there'll be 5 years in a row in WI World Finals. So that's where it's at. It's just trying to do it year after year. Yep. So I look forward to maintaining that.
Yep, we do too. Look forward to watching and being fans. Well, let's close this out. So I'll remind everybody again, subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow the podcast on Spotify and Podbean. We're still working on iTunes. I'm in the middle of my graduate semester, my final one, so I'm going to try to make myself find some time to attempt to get us on iTunes again and get that all figured out. The marching band seasons are now over for Evan and I. Well, my last weekend is in a couple days, but we'll start to be a little more consistent, I think, with these podcasts. So also like the Facebook page, follow the Instagram account, and we will see everybody hopefully in 2 weeks with the next episode.
Peace.